It has happened in Gabon, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea, Sudan, and more recently, this year it took place in Madagascar. Presidents being overthrown by military coups, and we certainly find citizens being more and more in support of these forceful takeovers. But is it truly the happily ever after that they think it is? Well, today we're going to be looking into the double-edged sword nature of military coups. This is a report and I'm your senior Doris. But before getting to the video, make sure to like and subscribe to the Next Generation Media channel so you don't get to miss out on any of our subsequent videos. So let's start by looking at the more global picture, the best and worst case examples from around the world before looking at the more particular picture that's in Africa. Okay, first, what is a coup? A coup d'etat, which is French for the stroke of the state, is a sudden and illegal seizure of power from a government. Now, unlike a revolution, which is a mass uprising from the bottom up, a coup is an inside job from the top downward, almost always led by the military. So, what are the upsides? Why would a military of a country resort in doing a coup? Firstly, to end tyranny. They might be seeking to remove a brutal dictator who has blocked all other paths to change. Or secondly, to restore order. It could be that they're trying to save the nation from a descent into civil war or total economic collapse. And lastly, they could be trying to force a reform where the military will act as a circuit breaker by taking out a corrupt elite to pave the way for a new and fair constitution. And this isn't just a theory, because we have the cleanest and most cited example of a good coup that happened in Europe, Portugal in 1974, where after 48 years of fascist dictatorship, the military moved in, and this was near bloodless. The people joining the military, then the new military junta then freed the political prisoners, ended the country's colonial wars, and the most important thing to note here is that they returned power back to the civilians. So within 2 years, Portugal was stable, had a stable democracy, and this very rare and mythical case is what inspires other countries to think that they might actually follow suit. But that is the exception. The overwhelming negative reality is that coups are a disaster, and globally, data shows that they almost always lead to more repression, not less. More often than not, the new leaders who have no popular mandate rule with an iron fist. Things like civil liberties, free speech, free press are the first things that get targeted. And the economy rapidly gets poisoned. So we have foreign investment vanishes, sanctions are imposed, and the currency collapses. For example, we have Myanmar in 2021, where the military reversed a decade of fragile democratic progress, which resulted in a brutal, full-scale civil war that pushed half the population into poverty, and a total collapse of the state, which has now become the world's #1 opium producer.
Myanmar has become the world's largest source of opium as poppy cultivation has increased and continues to expand in Myanmar for the third consecutive year. Farming methods have become more lucrative, producing greater yield and enticing more small-scale farmers to enter this illicit trade.
Now, looking to Africa, Africa's history with coups is long and deep. The first wave came in the 60s and 70s, right after independence. We had new fragile states, and the military stepped in, claiming to correct the course of the new nation. But today, we are more in a recent wave, especially in the coup belt in the Sahel, which includes countries such as Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Guinea. And this new wave is driven by deep popular frustration with two things. One, the failure of the government to stop insecurity, and two, the same old story of leaders changing constitution to stay in power forever. And if we are looking for the most iconic African example, we need to have a talk about Captain Thomas Sankara of Burkina Faso in the 1983. He seized power with massive popular support and was a true revolutionary. He championed women's rights, vaccinated millions, fought corruption, and built national pride. Till date, he is a hero to many. But his legacy is complex. Why? Because he also ruled by decree. He banned unions and restricted the press. So we can say Sankara represented the absolute best, most idealistic and most complicated version of a good coup in Africa. But for everyone Thomas Sankara, there is a Zimbabwe 2017 when the military finally ousted Robert Mugabe after 37 years, and the streets of Harare were filled with joy, people cheering, they hugged their soldiers. It felt like a new dawn. But what happened next, they did not see coming. It turned out it was not a revolution, but rather it was a substitution, more like an internal power shuffle in the same ruling party, where Mugabe's vice president Emerson simply took his place. The repression then continued, the economy got worse, so the people were sold some sort of a revolution, but only got a new boss. What makes coups in Africa unique is when coups happen here, the isolation is immediate and regional. The African Union and regional blocs like ECOWAS suspend the nation's membership, and it doesn't end at just being symbolic. It might mean the loss of political allies, and worst of all, regional sanctions and border closures can be immediate. And for landlocked countries like Niger, Mali, all this can be very devastating. It affects the flow of food, medicine, and fuel overnight. I mean, it is so common that at this point, it feels like it's following a pattern. First, you have the crisis where there's insecurity, corruption, bad elections. Then second, you have the seizure by the soldiers, where the soldiers come in, they take the TV station, the palace. Then you have the justification of the coup, where a general appears on TV promising to restore the coup and end corruption. And it always promises this temporal transition. And then finally, we get the crackdown, where the temporal period stretches and elections are being delayed and the junta just settles in the office. And this brings us to an even more scary realization, because as Guterres said, a coup in one country is a signal to would-be coup plotters in another. When we had the military in Mali succeed, the military in Guinea took note, then the military in Guinea then succeeded, and Burkina Faso was inspired. Now, when Burkina Faso succeeded, Niger saw its change, and finally it ends up creating this trend where countries just go along with it with no thorough consideration of how devastating it can become for the economy. So we get to have this double-edged sword, where we have seen both the revolutionary dream of Thomas Sankara, and we have seen the cynical side, the cynical institution of Zimbabwe. So we need to turn to ourselves and ask the question, is a coup ever a justifiable act? Or is it always in the long run a setback for the people? And if we are wondering why such topics are important in today's climate, we can look to Cameroon, where after the elections, the president came up to say Cameroon is not in need of a post-electoral crisis.
Le Cameroun n'a pas besoin d'une crise post-électorale dont les conséquences pourraient être dramatiques, comme cela s'est vu sous d'autres cieux.
And not just that, we have other countries like Tanzania, where currently there is an uproar against the current president, who many are calling her that one female dictator. We also have countries like Nepal, where there's actually a successful coup that was just staged, and we're looking to see whether that actually will turn out quite okay for Nepal in the long run. We also have countries like Mexico that are facing a coup. So currently in Africa, there's actually a lot of tension when it comes to coup. Like we said, when one happens, other countries take some sort of note and they are trying to replicate it. But I think currently one country that is happy with the way their coup turned out is Burkina Faso, where they have their president, Ibrahim Traore, who has been making headlines. We have covered, I think, several episodes about him and all the policies he has put in place. Regardless of the fact that he has taken more time than he said he would take in power, they post him quite happy with all the decisions he has taken. So I think that's one example, I think, currently that we have now in Africa of somewhat of a good coup. But still the question remains, are coups actually justifiable? Is it a good thing to actually consider them in the different countries, considering the fact that in the long run they can actually be very, very devastating to the economy? Well, that's all for today's video, ladies and gentlemen. If you like us to do more of such content, just leave your comment down in the comment section below. Tell us what you'd like to cover next. I've talked about countries like Tanzania, I've talked about Nepal, I've talked about Mexico. If you want us to do a deeper dive into these different scenarios happening in these countries, do leave your comment down in the comment section below. But before you go, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Next Generation Media channel so you don't get to miss out on our subsequent videos. And also, please do help our small channel to grow. And that's all for today, guys. Bye.